No one ever tells you what it looks like on the other side of that moment. I have watched it happen, more times than I have ever counted, and I stopped counting somewhere around my 25th year as a priest. I have been in the room. I have held the hand. I have said the prayers and anointed the forehead, and watched the chest go still. And I will tell you something that I have almost never said out loud, because it is hard to say without sounding like a man who has lost his grip on ordinary reality. There is a change in the room, not a noise, not a light, not anything you could photograph or measure, but something shifts, something in the air itself, in the seconds after a soul departs. And I have felt it in a basement hospital room in the middle of winter, and I have felt it in a sun-filled bedroom with the window cracked open in September. And every time, without exception, I have had the same instinct. Something enormous just happened, and that person, that soul, is in the middle of it right now. I'm Father David, and today I want to talk to you about the moment the soul meets God. Not the moment before, not the moment after, the moment itself. Because I believe, with everything in me, after everything I have seen, that almost no one is prepared for what that actually is. Not because it is terrible, but because it is so far beyond what we have been given words for. Now, I want to be careful here, because what I am going to share with you today is not speculation. It is not my imagination. It is drawn from the witness of the mystics, from the words of Scripture, from the experience of souls who were brought back from the edge of that threshold and tried, haltingly, imperfectly, to describe what they encountered. And from 43 years of sitting with the dying and listening and paying very close attention to what they said in those final hours when the veil between this world and the next grows thin. I need to tell you about a woman named Ruth. She was 81 years old. She had been a school teacher for 37 years. She was not a particularly sentimental woman. She was the kind of woman who kept her feelings organized, filed away, brought out only when necessary. Her daughter had called me because Ruth had started, in the last week of her life, saying things that didn't fit the woman her family had known. She kept saying she could see light coming from underneath the door. There was no door in that direction, just a wall. On the last day she reached up. She was too weak to lift her arm fully, but she reached, and she said, perfectly clearly, "It's so much bigger than I thought." And then she was gone. I have turned those 6 words over in my mind for, I want to say 16 years now, because that is when Ruth died, in October, on a Thursday afternoon. It's so much bigger than I thought. She was not frightened. She was not in pain. She was astonished. The way a person is astonished when they have been trying to imagine something their whole life, and the reality finally arrives and makes every image they had constructed feel like a child's drawing. That is what I want to talk to you about today, because here is what I believe, and here is what the Church has taught, in the writings of her greatest mystics, in the words of her Scripture, about what the soul actually experiences in that first encounter with God. Stay with me, because what I am going to share with you in the next few minutes is something I have been carrying for a very long time, and I think you are ready to hear it. Here is what no one says at a funeral, not the homily, not the reception afterward, with the casseroles and the folded napkins and the people who mean well. Not even, most of the time, in the confessional. There is a fear that lives underneath all of it, underneath the prayers, underneath the grief, underneath the decades of faithful Mass attendance and rosaries said and candles lit. And it is this: what if I am not ready? Not what if they weren't ready? You've worried about that too, and I understand it. But I'm talking about something closer to home, something you carry in the quiet of the night when the house is still and no one is asking anything of you, and there is nothing left to do but lie there and think. What happens when it is my turn? I have been a priest for 43 years. I have heard this fear in 100 different voices, wrapped in 100 different words. A woman named Lorraine, she was 77, sharp as anyone I've ever known, had been going to daily mass for 40 years, sat across from me one afternoon in the rectory and said something I have never forgotten. She folded her hands in her lap, looked at the window and said, "Father, I have given my whole life to this. I believe it. I have always believed it. But when I imagine actually standing before God, really standing there, I feel something I can only describe as terror." She was not a fearful woman. She was not someone who doubted easily. But she had arrived at 77 at the edge of the thing she had believed in her whole life, and the proximity of it made it feel for the first time entirely real and entirely enormous. I sat with that for a moment before I answered her, because she deserved a real answer, not a formula, not a pamphlet. And I have to be honest with you here, her words stayed with me for weeks afterward, because she had named something that I think lives in more hearts than are willing to admit it. The fear is not that God doesn't exist. The fear is that He does, that He is real and vast, and that when you are finally standing before that reality, without the buffer of ordinary life, without the next task and the next prayer and the next distraction, you will be seen completely. Every corner of you, every failure, every small cruelty, every moment you chose something lesser when you knew better. The mystics call it something. They have a word for it. Not a frightening word, not a condemning word, but an honest one. They call it the particular judgment, and it is not what most people think it is. This is where I need you to pay very close attention, because what Scripture reveals about this moment, and what the great mystical tradition of the Church has illuminated over centuries, is something that changes entirely the shape of that fear. The first letter of John, chapter 3, verse 2. It is a sentence that I have returned to more times than I can say, not as a priest preparing a homily, but as a man lying awake at 3 a.m, trying to hold on to something true. John writes, "Beloved, we are God's children now. What we will be has not yet been revealed. What we do know is this: when He is revealed, we will be like Him, for we will see Him as He is." We will see Him as He is, not through a symbol, not through a sacrament, as beautiful and real as the sacraments are, not filtered through language or image or the limits of a human mind still wrapped in time and matter, face to face, as He is. I want you to sit with what that means for a moment, because it is not a small thing. It is, and I am choosing this word carefully, it is the most radical claim in all of Christian revelation, that the soul at the moment of death does not simply cease, does not sleep, does not wait in darkness, but encounters directly and fully the being that is the source and ground of everything that exists. Isaiah saw it from a distance, just a glimpse, the hem of the robe, the smoke filling the temple, the seraphim covering their faces, and it brought him to his knees with the cry, "Woe is me, for I am undone." And that was only the edge of it. Stay with me, because what happens next, what the soul discovers in that encounter, what it means for the fear that Lorraine named in my rectory that afternoon, that is what I want to give you in just a few minutes. And I believe it will change the way you understand everything. Let me tell you what actually happens, not what we imagine, Not the vague, comfortable picture of a long white corridor and a warm light and a feeling of peace. Those images are not wrong exactly, but they are like a child's drawing of the ocean. They capture something. They miss almost everything. The soul, at the moment it meets God, is seen, completely, instantly, without remainder. Every theologian who has ever tried to write about this moment reaches for the same word and then immediately apologizes for it, because no word is adequate. But the word they keep returning to is light. Not light as in illumination, light as in exposure. The way a photographic negative becomes visible only when held up to a source bright enough to pass through it entirely. God sees the soul not as the soul sees itself, with the usual merciful blurring, the selective memory, the private justifications we have all constructed over a lifetime. He sees it as it actually is, the whole of it, at once. Now, and this is the part I need you to hear very carefully, because this is where most people's imagination goes wrong. That seeing is not a courtroom. It is not a prosecution. The church has always taught, and I believe it with everything I have, that the particular judgment is not God searching for reasons to condemn. It is God receiving a soul into the fullness of truth, His truth, and the truth of that soul's own life. I want to tell you about a man named Martin. Martin was a retired postal worker. He was 84 when he died. He had made his share of mistakes. He would have been the first to tell you that, and he did tell me, in a confession that lasted nearly 2 hours one Saturday afternoon in Lent, about 15 years before he died. He had carried certain things for decades, the kind of things that sit at the bottom of a man's chest and don't move. In the last days of his life, something changed in him. His daughter called me, a little worried, because he had become, she said, unnaturally calm, not resigned, not medicated into stillness, calm in the way that a body of water is calm after a long storm has finally passed through it completely. I went to see him. He was sitting up in bed. He looked at me and said, and I am giving you his exact words because I wrote them down that evening. He said, "Father, I think he already knows. I think he has always known, and I think he is not surprised. God is not surprised. I have turned that over in my mind more times than I can tell you, because what Martin had arrived at in his 84th year, with almost no theological training and a life full of ordinary human failure, was something that the great mystic and philosopher Edith Stein, Saint Teresa Benedicta of the Cross, who died in Auschwitz in 1942, spent entire volumes trying to articulate. She wrote that the soul, in its encounter with God, discovers not primarily its sin, but its origin, where it came from, whose it is. That the light of God does not arrive as accusation, it arrives as recognition. The soul is known, and in being known, it knows itself for the first time as it truly is. A creature made for this exact moment, for this exact encounter, for this exact love. She called it, and I find this almost unbearably beautiful, she called it the soul's homecoming. Not arrival at a foreign place, return to the only place it has ever truly belonged. Now, I need to tell you what this means for the fear that you carry, the fear Lorraine named, the fear that lives at the bottom of a faithful heart and almost never gets spoken aloud. The soul does not arrive before God as a defendant. It arrives as a child returning to the Father who made it. And yes, there is an accounting. The church does not soften this. I will not soften it either. There is a real reckoning with the shape of a life, with the choices made and unmade, with the love that was offered and the love that was withheld. That is real. 1 John 3:2 does not promise us that the encounter will be easy. It promises us that it will be true. and that in that truth we will finally see him as he is and be changed by the seeing. The souls who are not yet ready for that fullness, the Church teaches they are purified, not punished, purified, the way metal is refined. The love of God is the fire, and the fire does not destroy, it clarifies. And for the soul that has spent a lifetime reaching, imperfectly, haltingly, with all the failures that entails, reaching toward God in prayer and sacrament and the daily attempt to love well, that soul is not walking into judgment, it is walking into recognition. It's so much bigger than I thought. Ruth knew. In the last 6 words she ever spoke, she knew. What she encountered was not what she had feared. It was what she had been made for. Don't go anywhere yet, because there is one more thing I need to give you before we are finished. And it is the part that changes not how you think about death, but how you live between now and then. I want to go back to Lorraine for a moment. After she told me what she told me, that standing before God terrified her, I did not give her a theology lesson. I did not hand her a book. I sat with her for a few minutes in the quiet of the rectory, and then I asked her something. I said, "Lorraine, has God ever surprised you in your life? Has he ever shown up differently than you expected and better?" She thought about it, really thought about it. Not the quick, polite answer that a lifelong Catholic sometimes gives when a priest asks a spiritual question. She was quiet for almost a full minute, and then she said slowly, "Yes, more times than I can count." I said, "Then why would the last time be any different?" She looked at me, and something in her face changed. Not dramatically. Lorraine was not a dramatic woman. But something settled, the way a room settles when you finally find the source of a draft and close it off. She died 14 months later. On a Sunday morning after Mass, her daughter told me that in the final hours she had been almost luminously peaceful, not sedated, not unconscious, present and quiet and, her daughter's word, expectant. Expectant. That is the word I want to leave with you today. Not resigned, not braced for impact, expectant. The way you feel in the last few minutes before someone you love walks through the door, someone you haven't seen in a long time, someone whose presence you have missed with a specific physical ache. There is a nervousness to it, yes, of course there is. But underneath the nervousness is something else entirely. Anticipation. The knowledge that something good is about to happen, something real. The soul that has spent a life in faith, however imperfectly, however haltingly, however many times it has fallen and gotten up and fallen again. That soul is not approaching a stranger at the moment of death. It is approaching the one it has been oriented toward, consciously or not, in every genuine act of love it has ever managed. Every time you forgave when it cost you something, every time you stayed when leaving would have been easier, every time you got back down on your knees after telling yourself you were too tired to pray, all of it was a movement toward this moment. All of it was preparation. St. John of the Cross, who understood darkness better than almost any soul in the history of the Church, who sat in a prison cell in Toledo for 9 months and came out with poetry that has never been surpassed for its description of the soul's movement toward God. He wrote that the soul's deepest desire and God's deepest desire are finally the same desire. That what the soul has been reaching for in every authentic moment of love and prayer is precisely what God has been extending toward it from the beginning. Not 2 movements, one movement, seen from both sides. That is what the soul meets at the moment of death. Not a judge waiting with a verdict. The other end of a conversation that has been going on its entire life. I don't know exactly how to say what I want to say next, but I'm going to try. If you are watching this today, and you are in that season of life where death is no longer an abstraction, where it has a shape and a proximity, and sometimes a weight that settles on your chest in the dark, I want to say something to you directly, not as a priest performing a function, as a man who has stood at that threshold more times than he can number, and who has never, not once, walked away from it, doubting what waits on the other side. You were made for this encounter. The whole of your life, the faithful parts and the failed parts, the prayers and the silences, the years you were close and the years you drifted, all of it has been, in ways you cannot fully see from where you are standing, a preparation. A slow, imperfect, merciful preparation for the moment when you will finally see him as he is. And he will not be surprised to see you. He has been waiting. If what we've spoken about today has reached something in you, if it has given you even a small measure of peace about what lies ahead, for yourself or for someone you love, I want to ask you to stay close. Subscribe and come back, because there is so much more that I believe you are ready to hear about the soul, about prayer, about the invisible realities that are moving around your life right now, closer than you know. I am honored to share it with you. Receive this blessing wherever you are sitting right now. May God, who has known your name since before you drew your first breath, meet you in every fear you have carried about the end of this life, and replace it, slowly, with the only thing that can hold against that fear, the certainty that you are already His, that you have always been His, and that when the moment comes, that vast, luminous, obliterating moment, you will not be alone in it. Go in His peace.